black veteran is walking out of a small convenience store holding a bag of groceries. A police officer suddenly stops him and accuses him of stealing. The officer's tone is harsh and filled with prejudice. The veteran calmly shows his receipt, but the officer is not convinced. He raises his voice and demands identification while onlookers start to gather. Little does the officer know that this man has a powerful story and a son who will leave everyone speechless. What happens next will shock the entire town and even the officer himself. It is not just a moment of confrontation, but a revelation that changes lives forever. Let us know where you are watching from in the comments, and do not forget to like and subscribe for more powerful stories like this one. Stay with us to see how this story unfolds. In a peaceful neighborhood of Springwood, a small town in America, life moved at its own pace. The streets were lined with trees and the air was quiet. This was home to people from all walks of life. But beneath the calm exterior, the town struggled with hidden prejudices that often surfaced in moments of conflict. Among the residents was Samuel Harris, a black man in his 40s, known for his service as a decorated veteran. Samuel was a proud father to his 17-year-old son, Marcus, a bright and ambitious teenager with dreams of becoming a lawyer. Samuel was not just a veteran, but also a mentor in the community. He spent his time helping young men learn discipline and life skills. On the other hand, there was Officer Ted Reynolds, a figure of controversy in Springwood. He was known for his strictness, but also for his unjust actions toward minorities. Ted had been the subject of many complaints from residents who believed he used his badge to intimidate rather than protect. But his position gave him a sense of invincibility, and he rarely faced consequences. This story begins on a sunny afternoon when Samuel, dressed in a plain shirt and jeans, made a quick stop at a local convenience store to pick up groceries. It was a simple day that took a sharp turn when he encountered Officer Reynolds outside the store. This meeting was not just a clash of two individuals, but a collision of two worlds. Samuel, with his calm demeanor, represented patience and resilience. Ted, on the other hand, brought arrogance and unchecked authority. This encounter would not just test Samuel's composure, but also reveal a truth that would leave the officer regretful and the community in shock. Stay tuned to see how this story unfolds and how one unexpected revelation can change everything. It was an ordinary afternoon when Samuel Harris walked out of the convenience store with a bag of groceries in one hand and his wallet in the other. The sun shone brightly as he glanced around, ready to head home to his son Marcus. But as he approached his car, parked just a few steps away, he noticed a police vehicle pull up behind him. Officer Ted Reynolds stepped out of the car. His tall figure cast a shadow on the ground as he adjusted his sunglasses. His gaze locked onto Samuel, and his expression carried an air of authority mixed with suspicion. "Hey, you," Ted called out. Samuel turned toward the voice, his calm demeanor unshaken. "What are you doing around here?" Ted's tone was sharp and accusatory. Samuel looked at him with steady eyes. "I just bought some groceries," he replied in a polite tone. He gestured to the bag in his hand. Ted's expression hardened as he walked closer. "This car looks a little too nice for someone like you," he said, pointing at Samuel's car, a modest but well-kept sedan. Samuel frowned but kept his calm. "I served my country for 20 years, Samuel said firmly. "I've worked hard for everything I have." But Ted ignored his words and reached for his radio. "We might have a situation here," he muttered. He then looked at Samuel and added, "Show me some ID." Samuel handed over his driver's license, his military ID tucked behind it. Ted glanced at the license briefly before returning his focus to Samuel. His eyes skipped over the military ID as though it didn't exist. "You sure this car isn't stolen?" Ted asked. The words hung in the air, thick with accusation. By now, a few passers-by had started to notice the tension. Samuel took a deep breath and kept his voice steady. "Officer, there's no reason to think that. This is my car. This is my neighborhood." Ted stepped closer, invading Samuel's space. "Don't tell me how to do my job," he snapped. Then, without warning, he grabbed Samuel's arm. "Turn around," he ordered. "Why?" Samuel asked, his voice still calm but firmer now. Ted pulled out handcuffs. "I said, turn around," he repeated. Nearby, a teenage boy, barely 16, had been watching the scene unfold. The boy, who introduced himself as Peter, pulled out his phone and started recording. "What are you doing to him?" Peter shouted. Ted turned toward the boy. "Put that phone away," he barked. But Peter didn't move. By now, a small crowd had gathered, their murmurs growing louder. Some expressed confusion, others frustration. Samuel stood still, his military training keeping him composed even as Ted tightened the cuffs on his wrists. "Officer, this isn't necessary," Samuel said. "I have done nothing wrong." But Ted wasn't listening. He pushed Samuel toward the police car. "Let's see what you're hiding," he said smugly. Peter, still recording, yelled, "He hasn't done anything. You're just harassing him." His voice shook, but his determination was evident. The crowd's murmurs turned into comments. "Why is he being treated like that?" one woman asked. "He's a veteran," said another. As Ted placed Samuel against the car, he missed the growing tension around him. The officer was so focused on asserting his authority that he didn't notice the shift in the crowd's energy. Samuel, still calm, looked at Ted and said, "You don't know who you're dealing with." Ted smirked and replied, "I don't care who you are. You're just another guy breaking the law." But Samuel's calm words hinted at something Ted couldn't yet understand. What would happen next would leave everyone stunned. Samuel stood calmly against the car as Officer Ted Reynolds continued to tighten the handcuffs around his wrists. The small crowd that had gathered was growing larger. Their murmurs of concern and anger filled the air. Samuel glanced at them briefly, his expression still composed despite the unjust treatment he was facing. Ted's tone became sharper. "You think your little crowd here will stop me?" "I'm doing my job," he said loudly, as if to justify his actions. A woman in the crowd spoke up. "He hasn't done anything. Why are you treating him like this?" Her voice carried the frustration that others around her were feeling. Ignoring her, Ted grabbed Samuel's arm and began pulling him toward the police car. "You're coming with me. Let's figure out what you're hiding," Ted said with a sneer. Samuel's voice remained steady. "You're making a mistake," he said. But Ted ignored him. Peter, the teenage boy who had been recording everything, moved closer to the scene. His phone still pointed at Ted, capturing every moment. "You can't just arrest him for no reason," Peter said, his voice shaky but loud enough to draw attention. Ted shot him a glare. "Put that phone away, kid. I'm warning you." Peter didn't back down. "Everyone can see what you're doing," he said. His bravery inspired others in the crowd to speak up. "You're harassing him for nothing," a man in a baseball cap shouted. "Why are you arresting him?" "He hasn't done anything wrong," another woman added. Ted, feeling the pressure, turned his focus back to Samuel. "You people always think you're above the law," he muttered, loud enough for the nearby crowd to hear. His words only fueled their anger. Samuel took a deep breath and spoke clearly. "I've done nothing wrong. I'm a veteran. I served this country to protect people like you." Ted scoffed. "I don't care who you are. Right now, you're a suspect," he said, tightening his grip on Samuel's arm. The tension escalated further when Ted roughly pushed Samuel against the car. The crowd gasped. Peter's voice cracked with fear and frustration as he yelled, "Stop it. He's not resisting." Samuel winced but kept his composure. "You're out of line," he said firmly, his voice cutting through the noise of the crowd. Ted's anger flared. "Don't tell me how to do my job," he snapped. Then, without warning, he shoved Samuel into the side of the car harder. The crowd erupted in outrage. "This is abuse," someone shouted. "Call someone," another yelled. Samuel, still calm despite the pain, looked directly at Ted. "This is how you treat someone who fought for your freedom." Ted's face twisted with anger. "Save your speeches," he barked, ignoring the growing unrest around him. The situation reached a boiling point when Ted opened the door to the police car and attempted to force Samuel inside. The crowd was now shouting louder, their voices blending into a chorus of protest. "Let him go. You're going too far. Why are you treating him like this?" Peter, still recording, yelled again, "You can't do this. Everyone is watching." Ted turned toward Peter with an icy glare. "If you don't stop recording, you'll be next," he threatened. But the boy stood his ground. In that moment, Samuel spoke again, his voice calm but filled with strength. "You don't know what you're doing. My son is going to make sure you answer for this." Ted sneered. "Your son? What's he going to do?" Samuel didn't reply. His silence was powerful, and for the first time, Ted seemed slightly unsettled. The officer's arrogance didn't waver, but a flicker of doubt crossed his face. The crowd's energy shifted. They weren't just witnesses anymore. They were ready to stand up for Samuel. One woman pulled out her phone and called someone, saying, "This has gone too far. We need help here." As the noise grew, Ted's grip on control began to slip. He shoved Samuel into the car and slammed the door, ignoring the shouts and protests from the crowd. But what Ted didn't realize was that this was just the beginning. Samuel's quiet strength, Peter's video, and the growing outrage of the crowd would soon set events in motion that no one could have predicted. Samuel sat quietly in the back of the police car as the crowd's shouts echoed in the background. Officer Ted Reynolds tried to ignore the growing tension outside. His grip on the steering wheel tightened as he drove away. Samuel looked calm, but his eyes showed that he was calculating his next move. Meanwhile, Peter stood in the middle of the crowd, still recording with his phone. The other witnesses continued to talk about the unfairness of what had just happened. A woman in the crowd said, "That man was so composed. How can they treat him like this?" Peter's hands trembled as he hit the send button to share the video online. Within minutes, the footage was spreading across social media. People were commenting and reposting it with captions like, "Injustice caught on camera, and this is what happens to our heroes." The story was gaining traction faster than anyone could have imagined. At the police station, Samuel's calm demeanor confused the officers. Ted walked in, feeling triumphant. He smirked and said, "Let's see how tough you act in here." Samuel said nothing. Instead, he looked directly at Ted with quiet determination. Ted processed Samuel's information and casually glanced at his ID. His smirk vanished instantly. He squinted at the name and then at Samuel. "Wait a minute," he muttered. His hands froze. The room suddenly felt tense as Ted realized the name on the ID was familiar. Samuel calmly said, "You can call my son if you want more details." Ted looked confused and annoyed. "What's that supposed to mean?" he asked sharply. Samuel didn't reply. Back at the station entrance, reporters were already gathering. The video had gone viral. News vans arrived with cameras and microphones. Reporters were shouting questions about the incident. One said, "We've just received confirmation that the man arrested is a decorated war veteran. How will the police explain this?" Another said, "Sources claim his family is influential. What does this mean for the officer involved?" Inside the station, the officers were beginning to feel the pressure. A senior officer approached Ted with a stern expression. "We have a problem," he said. "The man you arrested is Samuel Carter. He is a retired Army colonel with multiple honors, and his son is a federal prosecutor." Ted's face turned pale. He stammered, "I didn't know." "He didn't tell me," the senior officer snapped. "You didn't bother to listen. Now we're dealing with a media storm." Samuel remained seated, his calm demeanor unchanged. The senior officer approached him and said, "Mr. Carter, we are reviewing everything. This will be resolved quickly." Samuel looked at him and said, "It's Colonel Carter, and I expect justice." Just then, the station doors opened. A man in a sharp suit walked in with a briefcase. His presence was commanding. It was Samuel's son, Michael Carter. The officers recognized him immediately. Michael was known for handling high-profile cases involving police misconduct. Michael's voice was steady but firm. "Where is my father?" he asked. The senior officer pointed to the holding area. Michael walked over and saw Samuel sitting calmly. "Dad, are you okay?" Michael asked. Samuel nodded and said, "I knew you'd come." Ted stood frozen as Michael turned to face him. "You are the officer who arrested my father?" Michael asked. Ted tried to defend himself. "I was just following procedure." He was acting suspicious. Michael's expression hardened. "Suspicious? You arrested a decorated veteran without cause. You used excessive force. And now, the entire country is watching." Ted's confidence crumbled under Michael's piercing gaze. Outside, the crowd had grown larger. People were holding signs demanding justice. One sign read, "Respect our veterans." Another said, "End racial profiling." Inside the station, the senior officer said, "We need to address this immediately. The longer we wait, the worse it gets." Michael handed him a folder. "Here is the evidence. The video is already public. My father deserves an apology, and this officer needs to be held accountable." Ted's voice cracked as he tried to explain. "I didn't know who he was." Michael responded. "It doesn't matter who he is. You treated him like a criminal because of the color of his skin." The senior officer nodded and said, "Colonel Carter, you are free to go. We will handle this internally." Samuel stood up and looked directly at Ted. "I hope you learn from this," he said calmly. As Samuel and Michael walked out of the station, the crowd erupted in cheers. Reporters surrounded them, asking questions. Michael said, "We are not here for revenge. We are here for justice." This is about ensuring no one else goes through what my father did." The image of Samuel and Michael standing together became a powerful symbol. It showed the strength of standing up against injustice. Ted watched from inside the station, knowing his actions had consequences. This moment was just the beginning. The story of Samuel Carter and his son would ignite conversations across the nation. It was a reminder that dignity and justice must always prevail. The video of Samuel's arrest spread like wildfire. Social media platforms were flooded with posts demanding accountability. People from all walks of life began sharing the video with captions like "Racial injustice must end," and "This cannot go unpunished." Within hours, the video had millions of views. News outlets picked up the story quickly. Headlines like "Veteran arrested without cause" and "Hero humiliated by officer" began trending. The image of Samuel sitting calmly in the police car was everywhere. Reporters started to piece together the story. They discovered that Samuel Carter was a highly respected war hero with multiple medals of honor. Protests began forming in front of the police station. People held signs that read "Justice for Carter" and "Stop Racial Profiling." Families came with their children to show solidarity. A young woman at the protest said, "My father is also a veteran. What happened to Colonel Carter could happen to anyone." Local activists saw this as a chance to address the systemic issues within the police force. They organized rallies and demanded that Officer Reynolds face consequences. One activist shouted through a megaphone, "This is not just about one man. This is about every person who has been mistreated because of their skin color." The police department was under immense pressure. The senior officers called an emergency meeting. They reviewed the video and knew they had a crisis on their hands. The chief of police, a stern but fair woman, said, "We need to act immediately. If we do not handle this properly, we will lose the trust of the community." Inside the station, Officer Reynolds was starting to feel the weight of his actions. He avoided looking at his colleagues. Some of them whispered among themselves, "How could he not recognize a war hero?" Others were angry, saying, "This is going to tarnish our reputation." Meanwhile, Michael Carter was not done. He used his platform as a federal prosecutor to amplify the situation. He appeared on national news programs, speaking firmly about the incident. "This is not just about my father," he said. "This is about the countless others who face discrimination daily. We need change, and we need it now." Samuel, however, stayed humble. When asked for a comment by reporters, he simply said, "I served this country because I believe in justice. That is all I want now." His words touched the hearts of many. People began to see him not just as a victim but as a symbol of resilience and dignity. The protests grew larger. Community leaders joined in. Religious groups, veterans organizations, and even students came together. They marched through the streets, chanting, "Justice for Carter." A veteran who served with Samuel held a sign that read, "We stand with our brother." Businesses in the area started showing support. Restaurants offered free meals to protesters. Local artists painted murals honoring Samuel. The community was rallying behind him in ways that no one had expected. The pressure on the police department reached its peak when the mayor of the city spoke out. In a public statement, she said, "This incident is unacceptable. Our veterans deserve respect. Our citizens deserve fairness. I demand a full investigation." The department finally announced that Officer Reynolds had been suspended pending an internal review. The chief of police held a press conference, stating, "We deeply regret what happened to Colonel Carter. We will ensure that justice is served." However, the public was not satisfied with just a suspension. They wanted real change. Activists demanded mandatory anti-bias training for all officers. They called for a review of past cases involving Officer Reynolds. The department agreed to some of these demands, hoping to regain the community's trust. The story went international. Veterans groups from other countries sent messages of support. A retired general wrote, "Colonel Carter is a hero. He deserves our gratitude, not humiliation." This global attention only intensified the spotlight on the police department. Back at the Carter household, Samuel remained calm. His son Michael told him about all the support they were receiving. "Dad, people are fighting for you," Michael said. Samuel nodded and replied, "They are fighting for something bigger than me. They are fighting for justice." The backlash against Officer Reynolds was severe. People dug into his past and found other complaints of misconduct. Former victims came forward, sharing their stories. One man said, "He treated me like a criminal just because of my skin color. I am glad the truth is finally coming out." As the protests continued, Samuel decided to address the crowd. Standing on the steps of the police station, he spoke with quiet strength. "This is not about hatred or revenge," he said. "This is about making sure no one else has to go through what I did. Together, we can create a better future." His words resonated deeply. The crowd erupted in applause. People began chanting his name, not as a victim but as a leader. Samuel's calm yet powerful presence became a symbol of hope. The police department faced weeks of scrutiny. They implemented new policies to prevent racial profiling. Officer Reynolds faced a formal inquiry, and the department pledged to hold him accountable. This incident became a turning point for the city. It sparked important conversations about race, respect, and justice. Samuel Carter's dignity and strength reminded everyone that true heroes fight for what is right, even in the face of injustice. The pressure on the police department was undeniable. Officer Reynolds was suspended and faced a formal investigation. Meanwhile, Samuel Carter chose a different path. Instead of letting anger consume him, he focused on turning this incident into a lesson for everyone. Samuel called a press conference to address the community. The room was filled with reporters and local leaders. Samuel stood tall, his military medals shining on his chest. His voice was calm but carried immense strength. "This is not about one officer or one incident. This is about a system that needs change. I believe in forgiveness, but I also believe in accountability." The press conference was live-streamed, and people across the country watched. Samuel's message was clear. He did not want revenge, he wanted progress. "We must work together to build trust and understanding. This is how we honor those who fought for freedom and justice." Officer Reynolds, now sitting at home, watched the press conference. He could not ignore the weight of Samuel's words. For the first time, he started to reflect on his actions. Memories of the encounter flooded his mind. The calmness and dignity Samuel had shown in the face of mistreatment made Reynolds question his own behavior. A week later, Reynolds requested a meeting with Samuel. It was an unexpected move, but Samuel agreed. The two men sat in a quiet room. Reynolds struggled to find the right words. "I was wrong," he finally admitted. "I let my biases control me, and I disrespected someone who deserves the utmost honor. I am truly sorry." Samuel listened carefully. His expression was thoughtful. "Acknowledging your mistakes is the first step," Samuel said. "But what matters is what you do next." Reynolds nodded. He knew Samuel was right. He promised to take part in anti-bias training and volunteer in community programs. He wanted to rebuild the trust he had shattered. Samuel shook his hand, showing that forgiveness was possible but not without accountability. Meanwhile, Samuel and his son Michael began working on something greater. They established a foundation called Veterans for Justice. Its mission was to support veterans and advocate for fair treatment of all individuals, regardless of race or background. The foundation quickly gained support. Local businesses donated, and volunteers signed up to help. The foundation hosted workshops on racial equality and brought veterans into schools to share their stories. Samuel himself became a regular speaker at these events, inspiring both young and old with his resilience and wisdom. The community began to change. Conversations about race and bias became more open. People who had previously ignored these issues started to pay attention. Teachers implemented lessons on equality. Local businesses displayed signs that read, "Respect and justice for all." Even the police department took steps toward improvement. They partnered with the foundation to train officers on cultural sensitivity and bias awareness. The chief of police personally thanked Samuel for his leadership. "You turned a moment of injustice into an opportunity for growth," she said. Michael played a crucial role in the foundation's success. As a federal prosecutor, he used his platform to advocate for policy changes. He worked with lawmakers to draft legislation aimed at preventing racial profiling and ensuring accountability within law enforcement. The story of Samuel and Michael Carter inspired people far beyond their city. News outlets covered their efforts, calling them champions of change. A documentary was made about their journey, highlighting the power of forgiveness and the importance of standing up for what is right. Reynolds, now part of the foundation's programs, shared his story of redemption. He spoke honestly about his mistakes and how they had shaped his new perspective. "I am proof that change is possible," he said, "but it starts with owning up to your actions." Samuel's journey reminded everyone that dignity and kindness could triumph even in the darkest moments. His actions taught the world that true strength lies in seeking justice while showing compassion. The community held a ceremony to honor Samuel and his family. Veterans, activists, and local leaders attended. Samuel was presented with an award for his courage and leadership. As he accepted it, he said, "This is not just for me. This is for everyone who believes in a better future." The incident that began with an act of injustice ended with a message of hope. Samuel Carter turned his pain into progress. He reminded the world that even one person's bravery could spark change and inspire others to do the same. The story of Samuel Carter and his son Michael touched the hearts of many. It was a reminder that standing up for justice can lead to meaningful change. Samuel's courage and grace showed that even in moments of great adversity, strength and dignity could prevail. As the community began to heal, the impact of this incident continued to grow. Schools started programs to teach students about respect and equality. Local leaders worked on creating more inclusive policies. The police department made real efforts to rebuild trust with the people they served. Samuel and Michael became symbols of hope and resilience. Their foundation, Veterans for Justice, became a nationwide movement. It reminded everyone that veterans not only fought for freedom abroad but also stood for fairness at home. Samuel's story encouraged people to confront their own biases and take responsibility for their actions. The media called Samuel a hero, but to him he was just doing what was right. In his final public statement about the incident, he said, "We all have a role to play in creating a better world. Let us be brave enough to face the truth and kind enough to embrace change." Officer Reynolds also played a part in this transformation. By acknowledging his mistakes and working to improve, he showed that redemption is possible. His journey became an example for others in law enforcement, proving that change starts from within. The story inspired countless individuals across the globe. People shared their own experiences of overcoming injustice and standing up for what is right. It sparked conversations about how to build communities based on respect and understanding. As Samuel and Michael stood together at the Veterans for Justice headquarters, they looked out at the growing crowd of supporters. It was clear that their efforts had made a difference. Samuel smiled and said, "This is just the beginning. Together we can achieve so much more." This story is a testament to the power of courage, forgiveness, and perseverance. It shows that no matter how difficult the challenge, we can all work toward a brighter future. What would you do in a moment like this? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this story inspiring, do not forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real-life stories that spark change. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next video.